Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by GrandTheftWorld.com. This is episode 75. It's April 10th, 2022. We got a lot of stories to cover tonight. They're going to be very interesting stories. Some of them might deal with the so-called laptop from hell. There's not just one Hunter Biden laptop. There's at least two. There might be more than that. There's new stories coming out all the time, new pieces of evidence that are now all of a sudden being verified a couple years after this piece of evidence had been floated around. There's congressional acceptance of this piece of evidence in the congressional record. There's allegedly other pieces that have been censored that are now, according to a Swiss whistleblower, putting 400 and some gigabytes of this missing information, photos, 18,000 photos, putting them online for people to see.
Well, the whistleblower who shared Hunter Biden's laptop from hell with the media says he has a lot more to share. Jack Maxey spoke exclusively to the Daily Mail and claimed he and his colleagues have around 450 gigabytes of deleted material, which includes 80,000 images and videos and more than 120,000 archived emails from the president's son. Maxey said he intends to publish them to an online database, and because of this, he has fled from the United States to Switzerland out of fear the Biden administration will retaliate against him. Jack Maxey is the whistleblower who had his hands on Hunter Biden's damning laptop that has plagued the Democrats since the 2020 election. In order for Jack Maxey to release what he found, he started to post documents and emails on a file-sharing site in October 2020, a month before the election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Within an hour, the files were taken down by what he assumed was the US government working to destroy any of Hunter's personal activity being shared.
And then we're going to dig into a story which takes the title episode, the new offering, Disney's offering Groom service. And there was a leaked Zoom call from Disney where they were explaining in their own words what they're seeking to do to the young children of the nation.
Let's take a look at video footage of Disney executives that was leaked out and obtained by Chris Rufo, so you can hear it directly from the child-licking horse's mouth.
Our leadership over there has been so welcoming to my not at all secret gay agenda. And
that's right, Disney has quite the sexual agenda with your children.
I was just wherever I could, just basically adding queerness to if you see anything queer in the show, I'm proud family. But I just was no one would stop me.
And here's Disney corporate president Carrie Burr.
We have many LGBTQIA characters in our stories, and yet we don't have enough leads.
Did she say LGBTQIA? Those new letters seem important. And here's Disney production coordinator Alan March.
I've had the privilege of working with the Moon Girl team for the last 2 years, and they've been really open to exploring queer stories. And
children need to be exposed to all forms of eroticism, not just none. And here's Disney's diversity and inclusivity manager, Vivian Ware. Sounds like she's the one that really moves the needle forward on business, doesn't it? Take a look.
We no longer say ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
Yeah, instead of using language that accurately describes reality, it's better to use a hallucinatory-based language that creates a mental fog so your children can't see the North Star of what's called reality. Come visit Disney's Marxist theme parks today.
And then aside from that Zoom link, there's various pieces of legislation and people pushing back against this. There's a couple good news stories covering that. And then last but not least, just when we thought Fauci and COVID were out, they're coming back in.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And she should not get it?
If she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu,
she should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it, because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
We need to be prepared to pivot and perhaps go back on some of the mitigations, like masking if required. I hope we don't need to go there. I hope we don't. But if we do, we need to be prepared to be flexible and really taper and guide our actions.
this is what could maybe happen. I hope we don't.
Yeah.
I really hope that I don't get elected permanently as scientific equivalent of tenure where I have control over everybody. I really hope that I'm not granted the right to access all of your private records. I really hope we don't have to do lockdowns. It's on the table, but I hope it doesn't have to happen. I am the science, by the way. Have you heard? Yeah. That's what they nickname me. It's like no one nicknamed you that. Well, I call myself that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're looking across the ocean. We're seeing what's going on in China. Our hearts go out to the people who are being locked down in Shanghai. 27 million people on a horrific lockdown. There's a lot of awful footage coming out now, as opposed to 2 years ago when this whole thing went on. There was some, sketchy footage back then. There seems to be some more legit verified footage coming out now that is a foreshadowing of what globalism and what we call, or what they call themselves the New World Order, what they're seeking to do to all people on the planet.
Zero COVID policy, a city now, Shanghai, has 26 million people in
that's
Shanghai.
Nice.
They're now on full lockdown.
Oh, good.
We added the music because it was boring.
I like it.
No, it's a happy lockdown.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I have to stay inside my house.
I'm afraid of everything.
Mostly government.
When people talk about dystopian futures, it's already happening. And it's happening in the country that our political representatives, many of whom not only have financial ties, but they publicly praise. So Chinese authorities now, they're actually using drones as a way to what? To what? And I'll subtitle this for you. I'll do it as accurately as I can because it's in Chinese. Remind citizens to stay home. Please comply with our COVID restrictions. Control your soul's desire for freedom. Do not open the window or sing. That's what they're saying.
That's not creepy at all.
Do not open the window or sing.
That's pretty much the CCP party platform. Control your soul's desire for freedom.
They're still very polite. If that was Detroit, that cop car would be on its side.
Oh, for sure. This is disgusting.
It's absolutely terrible. And, where's the left speaking? The NBA won't even mention what's going on in China, but they'll...
Oh, of course not.
They'll support Colin Kaepernick and taking a knee. And so this begs the question, well, why aren't they reversing their policy as far as the lockdown policies? Well, this is, again, it's political because Xi Jinping, he is up for a party re-election. And for those of you who don't understand, the person is selected by their party there in China. And if he's seen as weak, he's probably not going to get that seat. Yeah. So this is about political expediency. It's about the fact that they've made such a big deal out of this, they have to keep it alive in order to maintain any votes. And we see that here directly in the United States, right? They're sort of bringing it back out. In other words, if we go into the midterms and COVID is no longer a thing, that is the worst case scenario for Democrats. And that's why this story that you're hearing in China and the political ramifications may sound eerily familiar to the rhetoric that you hear from our scientific experts in the United States.
The city's 26 million residents were initially placed under a 9-day lockdown, but now that has been extended indefinitely. But they're mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. Even faced with the prospect of losing points from their precious social credit scores, they've simply had enough. The breaking point appears to have been disgraceful scenes showing children being separated from their parents inside quarantine facilities.
Social media shows children, even infants, separated from their families at a Shanghai hospital after testing positive for COVID-19, isolated alone, crying.
As well as people being prevented from going out to buy food or seeking urgent medical care.
Anger is reaching a boiling point in Shanghai. Chinese social media showing residents in lockdown protesting, chanting, "We want jobs, we want freedom." Hundreds in one Shanghai neighborhood broke out of confinement, pleading for affordable food. This resident confronts the police, yelling, "Why are we being starved?"
They're not even allowed out for exercise.
Residents aren't even allowed to briefly step outside. CNN filmed this man walking in his apartment compound. He was immediately escorted back home.
People are dropping dead in the street because ambulance workers are refusing to get out and treat them.
A woman is screaming in desperation for the paramedic to help an asthma patient. His heart has stopped, she said, pleading to borrow the ambulance's defibrillator. But the paramedics refused to help.
There's also reports of the government forcibly euthanizing the pets of COVID infectees. And lest we forget, China's draconian lockdown was the model for Western countries 2 years ago. Professor Lockdown Neil Ferguson said on record, quote, "It's a communist one-party state, we said. We couldn't get away with it in Europe, we thought. And then Italy did it, and we realised we could." Lockdowns are, and always were, a devastating moral outrage. And just because we've learned to live with COVID in the West, doesn't mean those who promoted and implemented the horrors of lockdown shouldn't be held responsible and investigated. And if necessary, prosecuted for the horrendous damage they've done to society.
It's a warning. It's a shot across the bow. It's a warning. Those people in China that are living that way, they didn't have freedom in any semblance of their culture, so they don't know how to push back. Other parts in the world, people have the self-reliance, the understanding philosophically as an individual what their rights are. And I think it's up to people who understand such things to look at these situations, to take pause, not to get emotionally upset about it, but to see that as, ominous storm clouds on the horizon headed this way. So buckle up. We're going to kick off tonight with Luke Rudowski. His Sunday report from earlier today has some of this footage that I'm talking about. We'll show more throughout the episode tonight, but here's, a little sample, a little taste coming from Luke Rudowski of what's going on in Shanghai.
这个是正常的叫，好了，终于2万人，所有人都在叫，要命了。就刚刚5分钟前头，俺叫还没几个了，现在突然之间，所有人都叫了，要死！到底维持到啥个辰光？侬总要拨个标准，或者是讲有一个具体的说法。没，侬讲看，闷了7天。
Yikes. That, of course, is crazy video coming out of Shanghai, China, where, the government just indefinitely detained 26 million people without the proper equipment or food. A policy that this man publicly cheers on.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.